All right, ready to explore a world where books are actually illegal?
Sounds intense.
It is. We're taking a deep dive into Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451.
Mm-hmm.
It's a classic dystopian novel that I think is even more relevant today than when it was first published.
Oh, absolutely. It's a story that really makes you think about censorship and the power of knowledge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we've got some great excerpts from you listeners that really break down each part of the book, focusing on those impactful beginnings and endings.
Yeah, I love how Bradbury throws us right into the action, starting with that very first line. It was a pleasure to burn.
Chilling, right. I mean, pleasure and burn, they just don't belong together.
Mm,
But it immediately grabs your attention.
it does. And introduces us to Montag, our protagonist, who just so happens to be a fireman.
But in this world, firemen don't put out fires. They start them.
Yeah, they burn books.
It's crazy. And that opening line reveals something really disturbing about Montag's mindset. He finds joy in destruction,
It's almost like he's brainwashed, or at least conditioned to believe that burning books is a good thing.
right? It's not just a job for him. It's something he actually enjoys. And Bradbury really emphasizes that twisted sense of pleasure by using these vivid sensory details.
Like describing the kerosene hose as a venomous snake.
Yeah. It's like he's twisting beauty into something dangerous and destructive.
Exactly. And I think that makes us question our own perceptions of beauty and pleasure, right? Like, what happens when those definitions get distorted?
Well, that's where Clarisse comes in. She's this free-thinking teenager who really shakes things up for Montag.
Yeah, Clarisse is like a breath of fresh air in this oppressive society. She's curious and observant, and she actually enjoys nature.
Things that seem to have vanished in this technologically obsessed world.
Right. She's not plugged in like everyone else. She actually talks to people face to face.
And she asks Montag this really simple but profound question. Are you happy?
It seems like such a harmless question, but it clearly throws Montag off balance.
Totally. I mean, he says he's happy,
Yeah.
but you can tell he's never really thought about it before.
It forces him to confront the emptiness of his life and his society.
Yeah. Like with his wife, Mildred. She's completely absorbed in these parlor walls, which are basically giant interactive TVs.
It's like she's living in a virtual world totally detached from reality.
And then there's that chilling incident with her overdose.
Oh, man. That scene is just so disturbing. It's treated as almost commonplace, like it's just a normal, everyday occurrence.
Which tells you a lot about the state of their society, right?
Absolutely. They've become so desensitized to suffering and death.
And it's all because they've traded real human connection for this shallow manufactured happiness.
And then we have that turning point for Montag. That powerful scene where the firemen burn an old woman's house.
And she chooses to die with her books rather than live without them.
It's such a powerful act of defiance.
It is. And her final words, quoting Hugh Latimer, stay with you. Play the man, Master Ridley. We shall this day light such a candle, by God's grace in England, as I trust shall never be put out.
She's willing to sacrifice herself for something she believes in.
It's this incredible moment of resistance that really shakes Montag to his core.
He finally sees someone who values books so much that they're willing to die for them.
And it makes him question everything. The fireman, his job, the value of knowledge itself.
He starts to realize that maybe there's more to life than burning books.
And that's when he turns to Professor Faber for help.
Faber is such an interesting character. He's this retired English professor who represents the remnants of a more enlightened time.
A time when knowledge was valued.
Yeah.
He's living in fear, but he also becomes a symbol of hope for Montag.
A mentor who can guide him on this dangerous journey of discovery.
Exactly. And what I find fascinating is that Faber doesn't just tell Montag what books are important. He explains why they matter.
He talks about the need for quality information time to process that information and the freedom to act upon what you learn.
3 things that are crucial for a thriving society.
Absolutely. And things that are sorely lacking in the world of Fahrenheit 451.
So at the end of part 1, Montag is on this quest for knowledge. But he's also struggling to make sense of it all.
He's caught between 2 worlds. The world of ignorance he's always known, and the world of knowledge he's just beginning to discover.
And that's where we'll pick up in part 2.
Can't wait to see how Montag's journey unfolds.
Stay tuned for part 2 of our deep dive into Fahrenheit 451. We'll be back soon.
See you then. Welcome back to Fahrenheit 451. We left off with Montag on this quest for knowledge, but he's hitting some roadblocks.
Yeah, he's got all these books now, but he's having trouble actually absorbing the information. It's like he's trying to hold water in his hands.
Right, and Bradbury captures that struggle perfectly with the sieve in the sand metaphor.
It's such a vivid image, trying to fill a sieve with sand. It just keeps slipping through your fingers.
I think a lot of people can relate to that feeling today. We're bombarded with so much information all the time,
It's overwhelming. It can feel impossible to really grasp anything meaningful.
especially in a world where instant gratification is everything.
Exactly. And for Montag, it's even harder because he's surrounded by people who don't care, like his wife Mildred. She's so checked out, more interested in her parlor walls than her own husband.
Mildred represents the apathy that's so prevalent in this society. They're comfortable, numb, and unwilling to engage with anything that challenges their worldview.
They've traded real human connection for this shallow, manufactured happiness. And the really scary thing is that they don't even realize it.
Right, and Mildred's betrayal, turning Montag in for having the books, that really underscores the level of fear and control the government has over people.
It makes you think, what would I be willing to sacrifice for my beliefs? Would I have the courage to stand up for what's right, even if it meant risking everything?
Those are tough questions, and those are the questions that Montag is grappling with.
So he turns to Faber, his mentor, for guidance.
Faber becomes this lifeline for Montag, right? He's someone who understands the value of books and the danger of censorship.
And he actually gives Montag this little communication device, like a tiny earpiece, so they can stay connected.
It's risky, but it shows how committed Faber is to resisting this oppressive regime. It reminds me of all the different ways people have used technology throughout history to share dissenting ideas.
It's a constant struggle, isn't it? The fight for freedom of information.
Always. And for Montag, it's not just about learning for himself. He feels this urgency to share what he's discovering.
Which leads to that incredibly awkward scene where he tries to read poetry to Mildred and her friends.
Oh man, that scene is a train wreck. But it's also really revealing. It shows how knowledge can be perceived as a threat.
And how people can have really strong, even visceral reactions to things they don't understand.
Exactly. Like Mrs. Phelps bursting into tears while Mrs. Bowles gets all defensive and angry.
It's a reminder that even in a society where people are conditioned to be passive and unquestioning, there's still that spark of humanity, those deep-seated emotional responses to art and literature.
And that's what makes Fahrenheit 451 so powerful. It shows us how fragile freedom can be and how important it is to fight for it.
But the fight is far from over. Montag's in big trouble now that he's been discovered, and we're about to meet one of the most complex characters in the book, Captain Beatty.
Montag's boss, the fire chief. He's this incredibly intelligent and manipulative figure who seems to understand the power of books even as he's ordering their destruction.
He's full of contradictions, he's well-read, and yet he's leading the charge against knowledge.
It's fascinating, isn't it? It makes you wonder about his true motivations. Is he a true believer in censorship, or is there something else going on?
It's a question that really gets to the heart of the book's message about power, conformity, and the dangers of blindly following orders. Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into Fahrenheit 451. We left off with Montag on the run, having just done the unthinkable.
Killed Beatty, his own fire chief.
Yeah.
It's a turning point in the story.
He's officially crossed the line, no turning back now.
But he's not just running from the law, he's also trying to outrun the mechanical hound.
This terrifying robotic creature that's been programmed to hunt him down.
It's like something out of a nightmare. And it really highlights the power of technology to be used for both good and evil.
Right, like in our own world, we have all this amazing technology, but it can also be used to control and surveil us.
It's a slippery slope. We have to be careful not to sacrifice our freedom for convenience.
Absolutely. But back to Montag. He manages to escape to Faber's house.
And Faber gives him some new clothes and helps him cover his tracks.
He also tells Montag about this group called the Book People.
People who have memorized entire books to preserve knowledge.
It's incredible, really. It's like they become living libraries.
Exactly. They're safeguarding knowledge in a world that's trying to erase it.
But as Montag is running, he sees himself on TV.
The government has turned his escape into a live spectacle.
They're trying to make an example of him.
To show people what happens when you challenge the status quo.
And to discourage anyone else from rebelling.
It's a classic tactic of totalitarian regimes.
Fear and intimidation.
But it doesn't work on Montag. He keeps running.
He's determined to reach the Book People.
To find a place where knowledge is valued and protected.
And along the way, he has this incredibly symbolic moment where he jumps into a river.
It's like a baptism. He's washing away his old life, his old identity.
He's being reborn.
And just when he thinks he's safe.
The city is destroyed by an atomic bomb.
Just like that. Everything's gone.
It's a devastating moment, but there's also a sense of hope.
Because Montag survives, and he finds the book people.
They've been waiting for him,
They knew he was coming.
and they welcome him into their community.
A community of people who understand the true value of knowledge.
And they're committed to preserving it for future generations.
So even though the city is gone,
There's still hope for the future.
knowledge can survive even in the face of destruction.
And that's the message that Bradbury leaves us with,
The power of books, the importance of critical thinking.
and the enduring strength of the human spirit.
So let's all try to be a little bit like the book people.
Let's cherish knowledge. Let's share stories.
And let's fight for a world where books are not burned but celebrated.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Fahrenheit 451. It's been an incredible journey,
I hope you've enjoyed it,
and I hope it's inspired you to think about the world around you.
and to never take your freedom for granted.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep the flame of curiosity burning bright.